So today I wanted to talk about the difference between densities and dimensions and the different levels and what they mean. Many people have been asking about that topic, especially given world situations and looking at the deeper meaning behind it all and the notion that we are indeed perhaps moving from one density and dimension to another. This information I share today is based on many years of research and also my own gnosis, inner knowing in connection with my own higher mind. And you also may have your own understanding. And so take what you find useful and leave the rest. And of course, many people in the awakening communities are talking about all that kind of information these days more and more. It's a very fascinating topic to many. And, of course, the topic of densities and dimensions is featured often in my novel, Heliotropous, and people ask me about how to differentiate. So here goes. Now, people often ask me if these are just fantasy topics, like the topics of densities and dimensions, or real at some level of existence. I do believe there is some truth to all this, and that's why I study it. I like to put these ideas into a fiction format because I think it's easier to consume in that way. It gives it a possible context for deeper understanding of the material, and it's just more entertaining. And if you don't choose to believe it, you can just enjoy the story. Everything in the universe is there for learning, for discerning. It's up to each person. But this notion of densities versus dimensions and our bigger story of evolution seems to fascinate a lot of people, including myself. For example, where do we go when we leave our physical body? I've done a lot of research in this area, such as near-death experiences. Maybe you have too, or even experienced one yourself. If you have, then maybe you know that death is really nothing to fear. The truth is that death is only a transition, a door, or a release from one dimension to another. It's my understanding that humans and other beings in the galaxy are designed to evolve through various densities, dimensions, growing as a soul until they come back into oneness. And if you are in a lower density, it brings you further away from source, unity, oneness. Maybe you might call it God, the great creator, or what they call Sana in the novel Heliotropous. And of course, being in a higher density brings you closer to this source of all things. For example, on the surface of Earth, most people are in third density, whereas many people in inner Earth are in fourth density. It's said there are at least 12 densities. And each time you rise from a lower density to a higher one, it's referred to as ascension, or one step more in the evolution process. It's also possible to descend through the densities, which some people do by conscious choice, or they get thrown back because of bad choices. As surface humans move from third density to fifth density, they go from Homo sapien to Homo luminous. The theory of the Homo luminous person is that you have more of a light body. It's less dense. It has less heaviness and greater psychic abilities. And at the higher density level, there is a remembrance of all your past lives or concurrent lives and your galactic family connections. And fifth density is not a perfect realm. Problems still exist. It is like the difference between, say, high school and university. You still have challenges to overcome, but by comparison, you are a free adult, able to make your own decisions, and the level of learning is more advanced and by choice rather than dictated to you. A certain percentage will not graduate from third density Earth, and they will need to repeat their lessons, and then some won't graduate at all and will drop out of the soul growth game and get recycled. So density refers to shifts in consciousness frequency, such as third density on the surface of the Earth and fourth density in other realms, such as the middle Earth realm of Heliotropous, and they are called 3D and 4D respectively. For instance, lower densities are more basic life forms operating by simpler laws. Higher density beings are more sophisticated in mind, body, and soul. So first density, or 1D, is the lowest, corresponding to say, subatomic particles, atoms, molecules, chemicals, and minerals, where consciousness development is basic and limited to just simple awareness. Second density, or 2D, is like plant and animal life, where consciousness first experiences willpower, passion, drive, pain, or pleasure. Third density, or 3D, includes beings like surface humans who possess the seed of self-awareness and free will and individuality. Consciousness makes the choice between, say, helping others or exploiting them. That's one of the lessons of that realm of density consciousness. And these three densities are fully physical and subject to the limits of 3 dimensions of space and linear time. We'll talk more about dimensions in a moment. They inhabit the same physical realm. Also, the densities blend into each other, and within each density there is a gradient from lowest to the highest evolved types of beings. And you can see this, say, in second density, where the lowest forms are like a sponge in the ocean or bacteria, and maybe at the highest level are primates. So fourth density includes beings that straddle the boundary between space-time and the higher ethereal realms, like in the inner Earth city of Heliotropus. For them, physicality is more plastic and responsive to thought. They exist behind the dimensional curtain and can project onto other realities at will, as we see in the story through transfiguration, time-space travel, and all that. And some are positive, others are negative. Both 4D beings and their environments are part physical, part ethereal. The spiritual goal or lesson of 4D existence is to fully love, to come from the heart, from compassion, and to experience their last opportunity of spiritual polarity. Telepathy and supernatural abilities come easily there. Now, fifth density, or 5D, is more of an ethereal level of existence from the perspective of lower densities. They have left behind the negative field for the most part and live in the positive field of existence, having absorbed the lessons of lower densities such as wise discernment, sovereignty of soul, love, and compassion. 5D beings are focused more on accumulating wisdom. Then sixth density, or 60, is where the 4D souls from inner Earth go. They kind of take a leap, 4D to 60, just as 3D leaps up to 5D. Now, those in 60 have finished their personal evolution and exist more as a group soul and bring the love lessons from 4D together with the wisdom lessons from 5D. And they can move beyond space-time, so they can go wherever, whenever they like. And as I said, there is also 7D, 8D, 9D, 10D, 11D, and 12D, but it's hard for 3D or even 4D humans to wrap their heads around what that's like. Now let's look at dimensions. The 5 dimensions, as opposed to densities, actually refer to length, width, depth, time, and space, and relate in the book to the Tavis Avara aptitudes that are talked about. So, for example, by many accounts, the first dimension is height, or another way of looking at it is the past. A visual description would be just a straight line, like drawing a straight line on a page. The second dimension is depth, or the future, as in a flat square drawn on a piece of paper. And then the third dimension is length. So now you're going from flat square to cube, and it's also known as the present. So first is the past, second is the future, third is the present. And then fourth dimension is time, or also synchronicity, as in the cube moving in one timeline. Whereas fifth dimension is space, or also known as ascension, as in the cube moving in multiple timelines. That's where the ascension becomes much more fluid and easy. Now, many people use the term dimension to refer to a particular world, realm, or environment that is distinguished from another by more than just time or, say, physical location. But when used in a more specific sense, Dimension refers to the degree of freedom allowed for extension of movement. Those two definitions are sometimes interchangeable, or people see them that way, and sometimes they actually do correspond to density, but sometimes not. Of course, that's why there's lots of confusion between the terms. For example, surface humans exist in third density and are confined to 3 spatial dimensions, so they're also in third dimension, while inner Earth humans, like those in Heliotropus, are mostly 4th density and seem to have access to this 4th dimension, but also a bit of 5th. And this comes from the fact that they can move through solid objects, as in transfiguration, travel through time, see multiple timelines at once through their consciousness technology, and so on. But that's where the correlation between density and dimension ends. Otherwise, minerals would only know the line on the page, animals only the flat square, and humans only the cube. Yet these lower densities all inhabit the same 3-dimensional physical environment. Similarly, 4th density beings don't necessarily have access to a 5th spatial dimension that 5th density beings have access to, because it depends on their level of spiritual development or vibrational frequency. The other cause for confusion is that dimension is sometimes used as a generic term, as in realm or timeline or reality. Basically, some environment, not always our own environment. In some contexts, dimension and density would then be interchangeable, but not in other contexts. For example, there might be 3rd density beings living in a parallel Earth. And while they aren't from different densities or greater or lesser dimensions, some people might describe them as being from another dimension. So they're just using the term that way, but that's not the correct use of the term dimension. They're just meaning another world, not within our physically explorable universe. Therefore, just keep in mind that density and dimension are not the same thing, although occasionally the two are interchangeable. The idea, however, is that consciousness most often evolves rather than devolves, except in certain circumstances. However, at certain intervals in galactic history, new doors do open for consciousness jumps, doors that have been closed for many thousands of years, as is depicted in the story of Heliotropus, and that is talked about and written about in many religious and spiritual traditions. In other words, prophecies about this particular time in history being one of those doors. A metaphor to explain density expansion is, if you can imagine a glass full of shaved ice, where you might get a snow cone, where 3D people are existing is similar to this. It's compact and tight. There is very little room to move around. 5D, on the other hand, would look more like a glass full of ice cubes, like from an ice tray, where there's much more space between the cubes. So what's important to help make the shift personally and globally is to use our imaginations to go there, with the idea that at some level of our being, we've perhaps already been there. So it's kind of like remembering. So back to the metaphor, one key aspect is spaciousness in 5D as compared to 3D. So in 3D, there is a physical sense of density, compactness, pressure, and maybe you can relate to that heavy, dense feeling at times in your body. So try feeling what it's like to be physically spacious, light, expanded, and expansive. Also in 3D, there is a mental, emotional sense of density and pressure. Maybe you can relate to that as well, where you feel emotionally heavy and a dense feeling in the mind. So try feeling what it's like to be more mentally spacious, emotionally lighter, as if you were already in 5D. And then in 3D, there is a spiritual sense of density, compactness, pressure that you may also relate to. So try feeling what it's like to be more spiritually expansive, lighter, brighter, more embodied spiritually, which is what happens in 5D. Okay, good. Going through the different levels is like moving from kindergarten to elementary to high school to university. Each density has its own main lesson to learn. As I said, the 3D consciousness is where there's a sense of individuation, and the 3 lessons are to move from service to self to service to source, and that moves out into others naturally, and to move from enslavement of mind to sovereignty of mind, and from naivety to wise discernment. So when surface humans ascend organically or naturally, they go from 3D to 5D, and inner earth humans, as I said, ascend from 4D to 6D as they are supporting them. So they're always one step up the ladder. SIM, or an artificial intelligence, hijacked the ascension process for surface humans a few thousand years ago, and so during that time it was referred to as inverted 3D. Of course, throughout sci-fi and fantasy fiction or movies, you see the recurring theme of the AI invasion, whether it's the Terminator series, Battlestar Galactica, The Matrix, and many more. So it's the idea that a simulated reality has taken over life on the surface of the earth, but many people think it's real. In the novel Heliotropus, this AI villain known as Sim has cut surface humans off from having control over the 4th dimension of time. They're stuck in this linear time. Now, each surface human is an aspect of someone in a genetic farmer group, like the one in the city of Heliotropus. This is based on the idea that several researchers propose that there are 22 extraterrestrial civilizations that have had genetic intervention in human affairs and were responsible for the different racial and ethnic groups on Earth. And there's a relationship between that and the 23 DNA strands found in the human genome. Now, apparently, that mixture of genetics is not the norm in this galaxy, so surface humans are, in essence, a genetic rarity, an amazing experiment that actually turned out well, whereby a higher density being can manifest into a lower density physical form, not possible before, and part of the 3D inversion was important for that, to really go to a very low density level and see if this higher density soul could still remain attached. Because the higher the density, the less that soul can be in a physical form. But now, after the precession of the equinoxes, whereby the tides turn and we move through the photon belt, the Earth or Gaia moves out of the 25 years of inversion into a higher density version of herself, going from 3D to 5D. The whole planet and surface humans are like the cells of the earth going with her. And it's now where genetic evolution decisions are turned over to surface humanity rather than other genetic farmer groups or any kind of inverted presence such as SIM, any kind of AI or regressive types of beings. At a certain point in a soul's journey of maturation, it discovers that the world it thought was its reality is actually a game or a virtual reality, not true life. In Heliotropus, this is called game revelation, and in the awakening community, they might call it disclosure. A person from a 3D inverted reality where the lessons are tough wakes up and realizes they were part of a multiplayer game designed to teach them important soul lessons. And once they mature enough, they get to wake up out of it all and realize that they are much more than a player in a game. They are part of a multi-dimensional universe on a journey from oneness to duality and back again. Or in the book, it refers to going from sana to sim and back, whereby sana is synonymous with sanity and wholeness, and whereby sim is synonymous with insanity and brokenness. It's like you can't know one without the other. If a being stays in a world of sanity, wholeness, love, joy, harmony, light all the time, there is no learning. Learning and discovery is done through contrast. One gets to know true sanity through exploring insanity, or where you lose your mind to other people's agendas, other beings' agendas, or cognitive control. It's where one knows true wholeness through exploring brokenness, where you know joy through exploring misery, or harmony through disharmony, or light through darkness. For example, there is a third density Earth and a fifth density mirror Earth. In fifth density, they operate within the tri-wave form rather than the bi-wave, meaning beyond the polarities of good and bad. The 5D Earth has always been there, but if you're not dialed into the right frequency, you don't experience it. It's like dialing into a certain radio station. And once a soul has learned their particular lessons in the density level they're in and passed their exams, they can move closer back to the world of sanity, sana, love, and wholeness. Unless, of course, they're enjoying the duality consciousness and all the drama, and they can choose to stay there. The only problem is that Gaia, or Earth, is now leaving that realm of duality, moving out of 3D. So those souls that still want it need to go find another playground. But if the soul is done with that level of extreme in terms of duality, then they can explore a more refined frequency in higher densities where they learn other kinds of lessons. Another thing is that once a soul graduates from 3D inverted consciousness, they become more aware of other densities and dimensions, such as being able to communicate with those in inner Earth or outer space or on other planets. They return to an ability to telepathically communicate as well with extraterrestrials, meaning from another planet, or interdimensionals, meaning from another dimension, as several dimensions can operate in the same space. Or they can telepathically communicate with animals or plants or other humans like them, just no need for words anymore. So 5D Earth already exists, and some souls are there already and will welcome 3D humans when they arrive, just like new high school graduates arrive on the college campus as freshmen. 5D was there all along, but they just didn't see it until they were ready to see it. Similarly, in fifth density, it is in the sixth dimension where surface humans are graduating to, where they can see, feel, and hear things that they couldn't before. And as you may have noticed, some people in the world today are awakening to higher densities and higher dimensions sooner than others. And this can cause a lot of confusion and even fighting and misunderstanding. And it's tempting for an awakening person to want to wake others up too as this revelation occurs, but it doesn't really work. It's like getting annoyed at a colorblind person because they can't see color. They just aren't there yet. You can share tidbits if they're open to it. Like a colorblind person might be more motivated to seek out cures for colorblindness if they're given a description of what's possible, even if they can't understand it yet. That said, some graduating players are on a mission to act as what we might call teaching assistants for others who are just beginning to wake up, but it has to be done in the right way since this path is fraught with pushback from sim agents, or from people caught up in cognitive control, not to talk about those kinds of things. Sim pushes back in three ways when souls start to wake up. Either termination of the source of that information, and you can interpret that in whatever way you want, but like literally killed off in some cases, or reprogramming of the source of that information, or ridicule, or disenfranchisement in some way, such as losing a job, money, status, relationship, reputation. And of course, you can see that in the awakening communities of people on the earth now, as in all the censorship. As a result, souls that are waking up need to develop physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and even psychic protection, and to really practice wise discernment and claim their sovereignty of freedom, especially freedom of mind, like being the writer of your own mind story code rather than letting someone else mess with it. All of which, as I said, are part of the final exam or part of the curriculum of getting out of 3D. So given all the strangeness in the world, it might be an interesting way of viewing what's going on. Is it perhaps about being activated to sort truth from lies, choosing inner authority over external sources of authority, having a clear mind, using critical thinking rather than letting someone else manipulate you into a decision that's not right for you? In fact, if you look back at your own life, most of us have been tested in this way over and over again. The tests are tougher right now only because it's final exam time. So just choosing to be willing to learn, to take back control of your own destiny, using that wise discernment, and you pass. And a new era begins, a true golden age in a higher density. Okay, so that's it for today. So you'll see in the show notes a link for getting the novel Heliotropous on Amazon if you like, if you haven't gotten it already, or just go to goldenagetimeline.com/book. And you'll also see on goldenagetimeline.com our other podcast episodes, and you can subscribe on the various platforms from there. So that's it for today. I hope it was useful. Do like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Okay, bye for now.